She's beautiful, Daddy. The saloon maid was laughed at until the cowboy's daughter stood up for her. The dusty streets of redemption. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of redemption, a small frontier town where dreams came to die and hope was as scarce as water in the desert. The year was 1822, and the Wild West was slowly giving way to civilization, though you wouldn't know it from looking at this forgotten corner of Texas. Martha Williams clutched her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as she hurried down Main Street, her eyes fixed on the weathered wooden planks beneath her feet. At 23, she had the kind of natural beauty that should have made men tip their hats and women invite her for tea. Instead, she was met with sneers, whispered comments, and pointing fingers wherever she went. The reason was simple. Martha worked at the Silver Dollar Saloon, in a town where respectability was measured by one's distance from the saloon. Martha might as well have been wearing a scarlet letter. It didn't matter that she only served drinks and swept floors, that she'd never so much as flirted with a customer, or that she sent every penny she earned back east to support her ailing mother. In the eyes of redemption's proper citizens, she was fallen woman, unworthy of their respect or kindness. "There goes the saloon girl," Mrs. Henderson whispered loudly to her companion as Martha passed the general store. Shameful, really. A young woman like that, working in such a place. Martha's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. She'd learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. The people of redemption had made up their minds about her, and nothing she could say would change that. As she approached the Silver Dollar, Martha noticed a small crowd gathered outside. Her heart sank. Crowds usually meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing she needed today. She was already running late after stopping by the doctor's office to send money for her mother's medicine. Well, if it ain't our little dove," called out Jake Morrison, the town's self-appointed moral authority, despite his own questionable past. "Come to entertain the gentleman, have you?" The crowd laughed, and Martha felt her face flame with embarrassment. She tried to push past them, but Jake stepped into her path. Now, don't be shy," he continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "We're just having a friendly conversation about the entertainment this establishment provides." "Please, I just need to get to work," Martha said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Work?" Jake laughed. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" The crowd erupted in laughter again, and Martha felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd endured this kind of treatment for months, but it never got easier. Each cruel word, each mocking laugh, chipped away at her spirit a little more. Just as she was about to push through the crowd regardless of the consequences, a clear, strong voice cut through the laughter like a knife through butter. "That's enough." The crowd turned as one to see a young woman on horseback, her long auburn hair braided down her back, her green eyes flashing with anger. She wore practical riding clothes and sat her horse with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle. This was Emma Cartwright, daughter of the most respected rancher in 3 counties, and her presence immediately changed the dynamic of the situation. "Miss Cartwright," Jake stammered, clearly caught off guard. I heard what you were doing," Emma said, dismounting with fluid grace. "And I'm telling you to stop." She walked over to Martha, who stood frozen in shock. No one had ever defended her before, especially not someone of Emma's standing in the community. "Are you all right?" Emma asked, her voice gentle now. Martha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Emma turned back to the crowd, her expression hardening. "This woman has done nothing to deserve your cruelty. She works hard to support herself and her family, which is more than I can say for some of you." Jake's face reddened. "Miss Cartwright, with all due respect, you don't understand the situation here. This woman works in a saloon. She's not respectable." "Respectable?" Emma's voice rose. "You want to talk about respectable? Let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who gets up every morning and goes to work, no matter how difficult it is. I see someone who sends money to care for her sick mother instead of spending it on herself. I see courage and dignity in the face of cruelty." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "What I don't see is anything shameful about honest work, regardless of where it's done." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Emma Cartwright's opinion carried weight in redemption, and her defense of Martha had caught them all off guard. "Now," Emma said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "I suggest you all find something better to do with your time than harassing a young woman trying to make an honest living." One by one, the crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Jake lingered for a moment, clearly wanting to argue, but even he wasn't foolish enough to openly defy Emma Cartwright. When they were alone, Emma turned back to Martha, who was staring at her with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," Martha whispered. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Emma replied firmly. "What they were doing was wrong, and someone needed to say so." For a moment, the two young women stood looking at each other, an unlikely pair brought together by circumstance. Emma, with her fine clothes and privileged upbringing, and Martha, with her worn dress and calloused hands, seemed to come from different worlds. Yet something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different circumstances. "You should go," Martha said finally. "I'm already late for work." "Of course," Emma said. "But Martha, may I call you Martha?" Martha nodded. "I want you to know that not everyone in this town thinks the way those people do. You have friends here, even if you don't know it yet." As Martha disappeared into the saloon, Emma stood for a moment longer, her mind racing. She'd acted on instinct, unable to stand by and watch the cruelty being inflicted on an innocent woman. But she knew her defense of Martha would have consequences. In a town like Redemption, taking sides in such a public way was bound to stir up trouble. Still, as she mounted her horse and rode toward home, Emma felt no regret. Some things were worth fighting for, and basic human decency was certainly one of them. Are you enjoying this story? Subscribe to our newsletter for more captivating tales from the Old West, delivered straight to your inbox. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but Martha felt anything but optimistic as she made her way to work. Word of yesterday's confrontation had spread through Redemption like wildfire, and she could feel the weight of curious stares following her down the street. Some looked at her with newfound interest, others with barely concealed hostility. Emma Cartwright's defense had certainly changed how people saw her, but Martha wasn't sure if it was for the better. The Silver Dollar Saloon was quiet at this early hour, with only a few die-hard drinkers nursing their sorrows at the bar. Martha began her usual routine of sweeping the floors and wiping down tables, trying to lose herself in the familiar motions. She'd just finished cleaning the last table when the batwing doors swung open, letting in a shaft of morning sunlight. To her amazement, Emma Cartwright walked in. The saloon fell silent. A lady of Emma's standing simply didn't enter establishments like the Silver Dollar, especially not alone and in broad daylight. Even the bartender, a grizzled man named Pete, who'd seen everything in his 40 years behind the bar, stopped polishing glasses to stare. "Miss Cartwright," Pete said, recovering his composure. "This is unexpected. Can I help you with something?" Emma's eyes swept the room before settling on Martha. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with Miss Williams." Martha felt her heart skip a beat. She set down her cleaning rag and walked over, acutely aware that every eye in the place was on them. "You wanted to see me?" Martha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did," Emma said with a warm smile. "I was wondering if you might join me for lunch today. There's a new restaurant that opened up on Elm Street, and I thought we might try it together." The silence in the saloon was deafening. Martha stared at Emma in shock, unable to believe what she was hearing. A Cartwright was inviting her, a saloon maid, to lunch in public. It was unthinkable. "I don't think that's a good idea," Martha stammered. "People will talk, People are already talking, Emma replied matter-of-factly. The question is whether we're going to let their gossip dictate it, how we live our lives. Martha glanced around the saloon, noting the shocked expressions on the faces watching them. She thought of all the times she'd eaten alone, all the times she'd been excluded from the simple pleasures that other young women took for granted. "I'd like that," she said finally, her voice growing stronger. "I'd like that very much." Emma's smile brightened. "Wonderful. Shall we say noon?" After Emma left, the saloon erupted in whispered conversations. Pete shook his head in amazement as he resumed polishing glasses. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Never thought I'd see the day when a Cartwright would set foot in here, let alone invite one of my girls to lunch." Martha spent the rest of the morning in a daze, hardly believing what had happened. At 11:30, she changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she'd been saving for special occasions, and made her way to Elm Street. The restaurant was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Emma was already there, seated at a table by the window, and she waved Martha over with a genuine smile. "You look lovely," Emma said, as Martha sat down. "That color suits you." Martha blushed. "Thank you. I've never eaten in a restaurant before, really." "Well then, we'll have to make this special." Emma signaled the waitress, a middle-aged woman who approached their table with obvious curiosity. As they ordered soup and sandwiches for both, Martha became aware of the stares and whispers from other diners. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but Emma seemed completely unbothered by the attention. "Tell me about yourself," Emma said once the waitress had left. "I know you work at the saloon and that you send money to your mother, but I'd like to know more." Martha hesitated. She wasn't used to people taking a genuine interest in her life. "There's not much to tell. I came here from Missouri about a year ago when my mother got sick. The doctor said she needed expensive treatments, and the saloon was the only place that would hire me." "That must have been difficult," Emma said softly. "Leaving everything you knew to come to a strange place." "It was," Martha admitted, "but I didn't have a choice. My mother, she's all I have left. My father died when I was 16, and it's been just the two of us ever since." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Family is important. I'm fortunate to have my father, though I know he worries about me sometimes." "Why would he worry?" Martha asked, genuinely curious. Emma laughed, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "Because I'm 21 and unmarried, for one thing. In his world, a woman my age should be settled down with a husband and children by now. But I've never met anyone who saw me as more than just a convenient match." Martha found this hard to believe. Emma was beautiful, intelligent, and wealthy. Surely she could have her pick of suitors. "I suppose that sounds foolish to you," Emma continued, "complaining about having too many choices when you've had so few." "It doesn't sound foolish at all," Martha said. "Everyone wants to be valued for who they are, not just what they can provide." Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable conversation, talking about books they'd read, places they'd like to visit, and dreams they harbored. Martha found herself relaxing for the first time in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of friendly conversation with someone who didn't judge her. "I have a confession to make," Emma said as they finished their meal. "Yesterday wasn't the first time I'd seen you. I've noticed you around town for weeks, and I've been appalled by how people treat you." Martha looked up in surprise. "You have?" "Yes, and I've been a coward for not speaking up sooner. Yesterday, when I saw that crowd tormenting you, I couldn't stay silent anymore." "You're not a coward," Martha said firmly. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. Do you know what it means to me, having someone stand up for me like that?" Emma reached across the table and squeezed Martha's hand. "I hope we can be friends, Martha. Real friends." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'd like that more than anything." As they prepared to leave, Emma insisted on paying for both meals despite Martha's protest. They walked out together, and Martha noticed that the whispers and stares seemed less hostile now, more curious than condemning. "Would you like to take a walk?" Emma asked. "It's such a beautiful day." They strolled through the town square, past the church and the schoolhouse, talking and laughing like old friends. For the first time since arriving in Redemption, Martha felt like she belonged somewhere. "Emma," Martha said as they paused by the fountain in the center of the square, "why are you doing this? You could be friends with anyone in town. Why choose me?" Emma was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because you're real, Martha. You're honest and kind and brave, even when the world is cruel to you. That's rare, and it's precious." She paused, then added with a smile, "Besides, I've always been drawn to people who don't fit the mold. Life is much more interesting that way." As the afternoon sun began to slant lower in the sky, they reluctantly parted ways. Martha returned to the saloon with a lightness in her step that hadn't been there in months. For the first time since coming to Redemption, she had a friend, a real friend who saw her worth, despite what others thought. Little did she know that their friendship would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. Word of Emma and Martha's public lunch spread through Redemption faster than a prairie fire. By evening, it was the topic of conversation in every parlor, every shop, in every street corner in town. The reactions were as varied as they were passionate. At the Cartwright Ranch, Emma's father, William Cartwright, paced the length of his study like a caged lion. A man in his 50s, with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of decades of hard work. He had built his ranch from nothing and commanded respect throughout the territory. But respect, he knew, was a fragile thing that could be lost in an instant. "Emma, what were you thinking?" he asked when his daughter finally returned home. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the strain beneath it. Emma removed her hat and set it on the side table, meeting her father's gaze steadily. "I was thinking that I wanted to have lunch with a friend." "A friend?" William's voice rose slightly. "Emma, that woman works in a saloon. Do you understand what people are saying?" "I understand perfectly what people are saying," Emma replied, her chin lifting defiantly. "The question is whether we're going to let small-minded gossip dictate who we associate with." William sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking older than his years. "It's not that simple, and you know it. Our reputation, our standing in this community, it all matters. It affects our business, our relationships, everything we've worked to build." Emma sat across from him, her expression softening slightly. "Daddy, I know you're worried, but Martha Williams is a good person. She's honest and hard-working and kind. If people can't see that because of where she works, then that says more about them than it does about her." "But why her, Emma? Why now? You could have your pick of friends among the respectable families in town." "Because she needed a friend," Emma said simply. "And because I believe in doing what's right, not what's convenient." Meanwhile, across town, Martha was facing her own confrontation. Miss Henderson, the town's unofficial moral guardian, had cornered her outside the boarding house where Martha rented a small room. "I hope you're satisfied," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Dragging that poor girl down to your level." Martha felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. "I didn't drag anyone anywhere. Emma invited me to lunch." "That girl doesn't know any better," Mrs. Henderson continued. "She's been sheltered, protected from the realities of the world. She doesn't understand what kind of person you really are." "And what kind of person am I?" Martha asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "The kind who works in a saloon and corrupts decent young women with your influence." "I serve her drinks and clean floors," Martha said, her voice growing stronger. "I work hard to support my sick mother. If that makes me corrupt, then I suppose I don't understand the meaning of the word." "Don't you dare take that tone with me, young lady," I've lived in this town for 30 years, and I know trouble when I see it. You mark my words, no good will come of this friendship. As Mrs. Henderson stalked away, Martha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. She'd seen that look before, in the eyes of people who had already made up their minds about her. It was the look of someone preparing for war. The next few days passed in a strange sort of tension. Emma continued to visit Martha at the saloon, much to the shock of the regular customers. They would sit at a corner table, talking quietly while the rest of the establishment watched in fascination. Pete, the bartender, had initially been nervous about having a Cartwright in his establishment, but Emma's easy manner and respectful behavior had won him over. "She's all right, that one," he told Martha one afternoon after Emma had left. "Doesn't put on airs or look down her nose at folks. That's rare in someone with her upbringing." But not everyone was so accepting. A group of the town's leading citizens had begun meeting privately, discussing what they saw as a growing problem. Led by Jake Morrison and Mrs. Henderson, they viewed Emma's friendship with Martha as a threat to the moral fabric of their community. "It's an outrage," Jake declared during one of their gatherings in the back room of the general store. "A Cartwright associating with a saloon girl? It's unnatural, I tell you." "Something must be done," agreed Mrs. Henderson. "That woman is clearly a bad influence. Who knows what ideas she's putting into poor Emma's head." "But what can we do?" asked Mr. Peterson, the bank manager. "We can't exactly forbid Emma Cartwright from choosing her own friends." Jake's eyes glittered with malice. "Maybe not directly, but there are other ways to handle this situation." The plan they hatched was as cruel as it was calculated. If they couldn't separate Emma and Martha through social pressure, they would find another way to drive Martha out of the town entirely. It began with small acts of sabotage. Martha's laundry, hung out to dry behind the boarding house, was repeatedly torn down and trampled in the mud. The window of her room was broken twice in 1 week, with rocks thrown through it in the dead of night. Her credit at the general store was mysteriously revoked, forcing her to pay cash for everything. But Martha endured it all, drawing strength from her friendship with Emma. They met almost daily now, sometimes at a restaurant, sometimes for walks around town, sometimes just sitting on the porch of the boarding house, talking about their hopes and dreams. "I've been thinking," Emma said one afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran behind the town, "about you said about wanting to see the ocean someday." Martha smiled wistfully. "It's just a silly dream. I'll probably never leave Texas." "Why not? What's stopping you?" "Money, for one thing, and my mother needs me to keep sending her medicine money." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if there was a way to make more money? Enough to help your mother and still have some left over for yourself?" Martha looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" "I've been talking to my father about expanding our operations. We need someone to manage the books, handle correspondence, that sort of thing. Someone intelligent and trustworthy." Emma paused, then added, "Someone like you." Martha's eyes widened. "Emma, I couldn't. People would never accept it." "People will accept what we tell them to accept," Emma said firmly. "My father owns the largest ranch in 3 counties. His word carries weight." But even as they talked about the possibility, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the trees nearby. Dick Morrison had been following them, and he'd heard enough to know that their plans had to be accelerated. That night, he called another meeting of his conspirators. "She's getting her claws deeper into the Cartwright girl," he reported. "Soon she'll have a position at the ranch. And then, where will we be? A saloon girl with influence over one of the most powerful families in the territory? What do you propose we do?" Mrs. Henderson asked. Jake's smile was cold and calculating. "We're going to give Miss Williams a choice. Leave town voluntarily or face the consequences." "What consequences?" Mr. Peterson asked nervously. "Leave that to me," Jake replied. "But I guarantee you, by the end of the week, either Martha Williams will be gone, or she'll wish she had never set foot in Redemption." As the conspirators dispersed into the night, none of them noticed the small figure pressed against the window of the general store. Tommy Henderson, Miss Henderson's 12-year-old grandson, had been trying to retrieve a ball that had rolled behind the building when he'd overheard the entire conversation. Tommy had always been fond of Martha, who had once helped him when he'd fallen and scraped his knee badly. She'd cleaned his wound, bandaged it carefully, and even given him a peppermint stick to make him feel better. He'd never forgotten her kindness. Now, as they crept away from the store, Tommy knew he had to warn her. But how could a 12-year-old boy stand against the most powerful adults in town? The storm was gathering, and Martha Williams was standing directly in its path. Want to know what happens next? Join our community of Western fiction lovers and never miss an update to this thrilling tale. Tommy Henderson spent a sleepless night wrestling with what he'd overheard. By morning he'd made his decision. Despite his fear of his grandmother's wrath, he knew he had to warn Martha about the plot against her. He found her sweeping the front steps of the Silver Dollar just as the sun was rising over the eastern hills. Martha looked up in surprise as the boy approached, noting the worried expression on his young face. "Tommy, what are you doing here so early?" The boy glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. "Miss Martha, I need to tell you something important, but you can't let anyone know it came from me." Martha set down her broom and knelt to the boy's level. "What is it, Tommy? You look frightened." In a whispered rush, Tommy told her everything he'd heard the night before. As he spoke, Martha felt a chill run down her spine. She'd known that some people in town disliked her, but she hadn't realized the extent of their animosity or their willingness to act on it. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. When he finished, Tommy nodded solemnly. "I heard every word, Miss Martha. They're planning something bad, and it's going to happen soon." Martha squeezed the boy's shoulder gently. "Thank you for telling me, Tommy. You're very brave. What are you going to do?" Martha stood, her mind racing. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out." After Tommy left, Martha tried to continue her work, but her hands were shaking too badly to be effective. She kept dropping things and jumping at every sound. When Emma arrived for their usual morning visit, she immediately noticed something was wrong. "Martha, what's happened? You look terrified." Martha glanced around the nearly empty saloon, then led Emma to their usual corner table. In a low voice, she told her friend what Tommy had revealed. Emma's face grew pale, then flushed with anger. "They wouldn't dare, wouldn't dare?" Martha asked. "Emma, these people see me as a threat to everything they hold dear. They think I'm corrupting you, leading you astray. That's ridiculous, is it?" Martha's voice was barely above a whisper. "Look at what's happened since we became friends. You are spending time in a saloon, defending a woman of questionable reputation, going against everything your social position dictates. From their perspective, I am corrupting you." Emma reached across the table and grasped Martha's hands. "You're not corrupting me. You're showing me what real friendship looks like, what it means to judge people by their character rather than their circumstances." "But at what cost?" Martha asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Emma, I can't let you sacrifice your reputation, your family standing for me. It's not worth it." "You are worth it," Emma said fiercely. "You're worth more than all their petty prejudices and small-minded thinking." Before Martha could respond, the saloon doors burst open and Jake Morrison strode in, followed by several other men. The few customers in the establishment quickly made themselves scarce, sensing trouble. Well, Jake said, his voice cutting across the room. "Just the ladies we wanted to see." Emma stood slowly, her posture radiating the authority that came from generations of Cartwright leadership. "Morrison, to what do we owe this pleasure?" Joe's smile was cold and predatory. "We've come to have a little chat with your friend here, about her future in redemption." "I see," Emma said, her voice dangerously quiet. "And what business is Martha's future of yours?" "It's everyone's business when a woman of her profession starts getting ideas above her station. Jake's eyes fixed on Martha, who had remained seated but was gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles were white. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Morrison?" Emma asked. "I'm suggesting that Miss Williams might be happier somewhere else, somewhere more suited to her talents." The insult came in the air like a physical blow. Martha flinched as if she'd been slapped, but Emma's reaction was swift and decisive. "How dare you," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "How dare you come into this establishment and insult a woman who has done nothing but work hard and mind her own business?" Jake's confidence wavered slightly in the face of Emma's fury, but he pressed on. "Miss Cartwright, with all due respect, you don't understand what kind of woman this is. She's not suitable company for a lady of your standing." "And what kind of woman is that, exactly?" Emma demanded. "A woman who works to support her sick mother? A woman who has never done anything dishonest or immoral? A woman who shows more grace and dignity in the face of cruelty than any of you have ever displayed. She works in a saloon," one of Jake's companions interjected. "So does Pete," Emma shot back, gesturing toward the bartender. "So do half the men in this room at various times. Are they all unsuitably for polite society?" "That's different, and you know it," Jake said. "Different how?" "Because she's a woman. Because she doesn't have the luxury of choosing her employment based on social acceptability rather than necessity." Martha finally found her voice. "Emma, please, this isn't helping." But Emma was just getting started. "No, Martha, I'm tired of watching good people be torn down by those who think their circumstances make them superior." She turned back to Jake, her green eyes blazing. "You want to know what I think, Mr. Morris? I think you're threatened by Martha because she shows more character in a single day than you've shown in your entire life. I think you're so insecure about your own worth that you have to tear down others to feel important." Jake's face had turned red with anger. "That's enough. Miss Cartwright, your father will hear about this. About how you're associating with saloon girls and defending their immoral behavior. My father already knows about my friendship with Martha," Emma said calmly. "And while he may have concerns about the social implications, he would never stoop to the kind of bullying and intimidation you're engaging in." "This isn't over," Jake smiled. "Mark my words, Miss Williams. You're not wanted in this town, and one way or another, you'll leave." "Is that a threat, Mr. Morrison?" Emma asked, stepping forward. Jake seemed to realize he'd gone too far. Threatening someone in front of a Cartwright was not a wise move, regardless of the circumstances. "It's a warning," she said, backing toward the door. "A friendly warning about what happens to people who don't know their place." After the men left, the saloon fell silent, except for the sound of Martha's quiet sobbing. Emma immediately moved to comfort her friend, wrapping her arms around her shaking shoulders. "It's all right," Emma murmured. "They're gone. You're safe." "No, I'm not," Martha said through her tears. "And neither are you, as long as we're friends." "Emma, they're right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. You belong wherever you choose to belong," Emma said firmly. "And I choose to have you in my world." Pete approaches their table cautiously. "Miss Cartwright, if you don't mind me saying, that took real courage. But Jake Morrison isn't the type to back down easy. He'll be looking for another way to cause trouble." Emma nodded grimly. "I know, but we won't let him win." As they sat in the aftermath of the confrontation, both women knew that the battle lines had been drawn. Jake Morrison and his allies had made their position clear, and Emma had made hers equally clear in response. The question now was what would happen next, and whether their friendship could survive the storm that was surely coming. Chapter 5: Standing Together. The confrontation at the Silver Dollar marked a turning point in the conflict that had been brewing beneath the surface of Redemption's polite society. Word of Emma's fierce defense of Martha spread quickly, dividing the town into two distinct camps, those who admired her courage and those who saw it as a dangerous rebellion against the natural order. William Cartwright heard about the incident within hours. He arrived at the ranch that evening to find Emma in the stables, brushing down her horse with more vigor than necessary, a sure sign that she was working through strong emotions. "Emma," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She didn't look up from her task. "If you're here to lecture me about propriety and social expectations, you can save your breath." William leaned against the stall door, studying his daughter's determined profile. "Actually, I'm here to tell you that I'm proud of you." Emma's hands stilled on the brush. "What?" he said. "I'm proud of you. Jake Morrison has been a bully and a troublemaker for years, but no one's ever had the courage to stand up to him publicly. You did." Emma finally turned to face her father, confusion clear in her eyes. "But you said our reputation will survive," William interrupted. "In fact, it might even be enhanced. Do you know what people are saying about you today? They're saying that William Cartwright raised a daughter with backbone, a woman who stands up for what's right, regardless of the consequences. And the others? The ones who think I've disgraced the family name?" William shrugged. "There will always be people who disapprove of anything that challenges their narrow view of the world. The question is whether we're going to let their disapproval dictate how we live our lives." Emma smiled, recognizing her own words from their previous conversation. "You've been thinking about what I said." "I have. And I've been thinking about Martha Williams, too. I made some inquiries about her, Emma. Discreet ones." "What kind of inquiries?" "I contacted the doctor back in Missouri who's been treating her mother. He also spoke with the sheriff there, and the pastor of the church she attended." William paused, then continued. "Everything you've told me about her character is true. She's exactly the kind of person you said she was, honest, hard-working, devoted to her family." Emma felt a surge of vindication. "So you understand why I couldn't stand by and watch them tear her down." "I do, and I have a proposition for you, for both of you, actually." Before Emma could ask what he meant, they heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A rider was coming up the path to the ranch house, moving fast. William and Emma exchanged glances and hurried outside. The rider was Tommy Henderson, and he was clearly in a state of panic. He slid off his horse before it had fully stopped and ran toward them. "Miss Emma, Mr. Cartwright, you have to help. They've got Miss Martha." "What?" Emma grabbed the boy's shoulders. "Who has Martha? What are you talking about?" "Jake Morrison and his men," Tommy gasped, trying to catch his breath. "They went to the boarding house and dragged her out. They're saying she stole money from the saloon. But I know it's not true. They're taking her to the jail." Emma was already moving toward the stables. "Daddy, I need to—" "We'll go together," William said firmly. "Tommy, you stay here. Miss Patterson will give you something to eat and a place to rest." The ride to town was tense and silent. Emma's mind raced with worry and anger, while William found himself thinking about justice and the abuse of power. By the time they reached the jail, a crowd had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Davis, a fair man but one who often found it easier to go along with the town's influential citizens than to oppose them, looked distinctly uncomfortable as William and Emma approached. "Sheriff," William said, his voice carrying the authority of his position in the community. "I understand you have Martha Williams in custody." "Yes, sir, Mr. Cartwright. She's been accused of theft." "By who?" Sheriff Davis glanced nervously at Jake Morrison, who was standing nearby with a satisfied smirk on his face. "Mr. Morrison here says she stole money from the Silver Dollar's till." "That's a lie," Emma burst out. "Martha would never steal anything." "Now, Miss Cartwright," Jake said with false sympathy, "I know she's your friend, but sometimes people aren't what they seem. We found money in her room." "You searched her room?" William's voice was dangerously quiet. "We had probable cause," Jake replied, though he looked less confident now. "Did you have a warrant?" "Well, no. But then the search was illegal," Williams stated flatly. "Sheriff, I demand to see Miss Williams immediately." Sheriff Davis looked torn between his duty to the law and his desire to avoid conflict with the town's power brokers. Mr. Cartwright, I'm not sure that's Sheriff. William interrupted. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Either you let me see Miss Williams now, or I'll be having a conversation with the territorial judge about how this case has been handled. The threat carried weight. William Cartwright's influence extended far beyond redemption, and everyone knew it. Sheriff Davis reluctantly led them to the back of the jail, where Martha sat in a small cell, her face streaked with tears. Martha, Emma rushed to the bars. Are you all right? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Martha said, though her voice was shaky. Emma, I didn't steal anything. Would never. We know, Emma said firmly. We're going to get you out of here. William studied the young woman in the cell, noting her dignity even in these circumstances. Miss Williams, I want you to tell me exactly what happened. Martha took a shaky breath and began her story. I was in my room, getting ready for bed, when they broke down the door. Jake Morrison and 3 other men. They said I'd stolen money from the saloon and started searching through my things. Then one of them, I think it was Mr. Peterson, suddenly found a bag of coins under my mattress. Money you'd never seen before? Never. Mr. Cartwright, I've never stolen anything in my life. My mother raised me better than that. William nodded, his expression grim. Sheriff, I want to see this alleged evidence. Sheriff Davis reluctantly produced a small cloth bag containing about $50 in coins and bills. William examined it carefully, then looked up with a cold smile. Interesting. Sheriff, do you notice anything unusual beyond this money? Sheriff Davis looked confused. No, see, it's just money. Look more carefully. At the bills, specifically. The sheriff examined the bills more closely, and his face pallid. These are all brand new, sequential serial numbers. Exactly, fresh from the bank. Mr. Peterson, isn't it interesting that money allegedly stolen from a saloon, where the bills would be old, worn, and random, happens to be crisp, new currency that could easily be traced back to your bank? Peterson, who had been watching from the crowd outside, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. William continued, his voice carrying to everyone present. It seems to me that someone wanted to frame Miss Williams and was careless about the details. The question is, who would have access to new bills with sequential serial numbers? Now see here, Jake Morrison blustered. You can't just... Actually, I can, William said calmly. Sheriff, I'm formally requesting that you investigate who withdrew the specific money from the bank and when. I think you'll find it very illuminating. The crowd began to murmur, and several people were looking at Jake Morrison and his associates with new suspicion. The frame-up was beginning to unravel. Furthermore, William continued, I'm posting bail for Miss Williams immediately. Whatever the amount. That won't be necessary, Sheriff Davis said quickly. Given the irregularities, in this case, I'm releasing Miss Williams on her own recognizance and pending further investigation. As the sheriff unlocked the cell, Jake Morrison's face was red with fury. This isn't over, Cartwright. You can't protect her forever. William turned to face him, and for a moment, the years of building a ranch in hostile territory showed in his eyes. Mr. Morrison, if you or any of your associates continue to harass Miss Williams, you'll discover exactly how long I can protect her. And I assure you, it will be longer than you can cause trouble. The crowd began to disperse, many of them talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed. Emma helped Martha out of the jail, wrapping her shawl around her friend's shoulders. It's over, Emma said softly. You're safe now. But Martha shook her head. No, it's not over. They'll try again, Emma. They won't give up. William overheard and stepped closer. Miss Williams, I believe my daughter mentioned that you might be interested in a position at our ranch. Managing books, handling correspondence, that sort of thing. Martha looked up in surprise. Mr. Cartwright. I couldn't. After everything that's happened, I think it's exactly the right time, William said firmly. You'll live at the ranch where you'll be safe. You'll earn enough to continue supporting your mother and have something left over for yourself. And most importantly, you'll be doing work that matches your abilities rather than just what's available. Emma's face lit up with joy. Martha, say yes, please. Martha looked between father and daughter, seeing the same strength and determination in both faces. For the first time since arriving in Redemption, she felt truly hopeful about her future. Yes, she said quietly, then more firmly, yes, I accept. As they walked away from the jail together, the three of them made an unlikely but powerful group. Behind them, Jake Morrison and his remaining supporters watched with impotent fury, knowing that they had lost this battle decisively. The story of Martha Williams and Emma Cartwright's friendship would become legend in Redemption, passed down through generations as an example of what could happen when people chose to see past surface differences to the character beneath. It was a story about courage, loyalty, and the power of standing up for what's right, even when the cost seems too high. But most of all, it was a story about friendship, the kind that transcends social boundaries and changes lives forever. Years later, when Martha had become the most respected bookkeeper in 3 counties and Emma had married a man who valued her strength as much as her beauty, people would still talk about the day a cowboy's daughter stood up to an entire town and declared that a saloon maid was beautiful. And they were both right. Thank you for reading this tale of courage and friendship. Subscribe to our newsletter for more inspiring stories from the American frontier and discover how ordinary people became extraordinary heroes in the Wild West.